Okay. Might just lightly put in here and here. Alright, so back with my B lead. I think I'll use, or will I? I might go 3B. No, I'm going to go crazy. Hold on. Going crazy. I'm going 4B, the 4B mechanical. I really like the way that mechanical pencils can give me a sharp definition, but also if I do that sort of scribbly motion, I can get nice shading as well. It's never going to be as good as a pencil like this where you can get the width of the lead down to make some really nice shading marks. But I like this, and I think in this context it's going to work quite well. This is not going to be, you know, like a highly rendered finished piece. It'll be a finished piece, but it's not going to be highly rendered, I guess is what I'm getting at. As in hyper realistically rendered. I'm happy to leave some of the details out for the imagination. The things that I really want to capture, also face proper, I guess, is what I want to capture. I'm happy for her hair, both on top of her head and down her shoulders, to be more sort of abstract in a way, you know, not finished, I guess is probably a better term. I want that definition to be in her face. That's the key area for me here. And that's what I'll do. So you can see the difference that just a softer lead, so it's darker, has already made. There's already different values happening just by virtue of the fact that this lead is softer. It's not that I'm pressing any harder. You can see that I'm at the back of my pencil still. It's just that it's softer, so it's laying down more graphite. It does mean that if you have texture to your page, this is fairly smooth paper, but it has got some texture. The fact that this is so buttery means that you will actually have the texture will be more visible. So if you don't want texture, you want to minimize the texture, you either need to go over your shading a number of times to make it not just darker, but more pushed into the paper. But really the best way to go about that is to use this softer lead, the sort of higher Bs, and then you can come back in with a harder lead, so either a pencil like this one, this is a 5H, or you can come in with a finer lead. And the act of just running the harder lead over gently, not pushing so hard that you scratch the paper, it sort of burnishes it in. Can you see the difference in the tone there? Just with me running this 5B over, while it will shade a little bit, what it's actually doing is helping to push the softer lead into the paper. Okay, so that's something that you can look at doing too. So you can see as I run my pencil over here, that this 5H, that's really not laying down any colour, so what it's doing is pushing that graphite in, darkening it up, but also removing some of the visible texture of the graphite on top of the paper. So that's a good tool to consider. I'll probably go back to the 2B to add more tone to her face around the highlights. Again, I'm just being very light. And it's not a stark line, the highlight, so you know, this is where you can utilize something like a paper stump, although because I'm using white I should really use a clean one, and just sort of lightly blend that in on the edges so it softens it out, adds it into the grey around it. That's really nice, isn't it? It gives a nice effect. I hope I'm not telling you all too much at once. So this is the process moving forward now. So I'm just looking at where the darker parts are, giving them a little bit more definition, this is what I call a sensitive line sketch. It's not really deeply detailed or necessarily hyper-realistic, but it should give a good understanding of what the subject is. It should feel romanticized in a way, I suppose. It should feel soft, but really still get the subject matter across. And you can see that I'm working from the top left down, and that's just really to prevent my hand running across the paper so much. If it was further up on the page, I would use some paper just to rest my hand on and not smudge things too much. We also have a lot of oils in our hands, so the less you rub your hand on the paper, the better, really. Look how that white pops by having the darker graphite laid next to it. This is the exciting part, I always think, you know, where you start to really see your work emerge, your subject matter emerge from the page. And this is also the hardest part when you're first learning, I found anyway, was to keep going. Like, I would have left the sketch that I've done underneath with just the bees, thinking that that was probably enough and not wanting to go too far in case I wrecked it. But you, as your confidence grows with sketching, with drawing, you will see that if you just push a little bit, then you're like, oh, right, okay, so that makes sense. So I'll just push a little bit further this way, push a little bit further that way. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And then the definition, the detail can only grow exponentially as well. And as I said before, the worst thing that can happen is you might have to use your eraser. And if you really bugger it up, you might have to start again. And, you know, the worst thing about that is that you may have spent 2 or 3 hours really enjoying your craft, and I think that that's a pretty bad outcome, a pretty good bad outcome, really. We can be very hard on ourselves. I know I'm very hard on myself. But you've got to try and consider what it is you're doing this for, who you're doing it for. You're doing it for yourself. You're doing this to learn, to gain skills, to have a greater appreciation for those amazing things around us, and to be able to communicate with it, with the thing that excites you in a different way. You know, like, this sculpture exists in reality, but now it also exists in a slightly different form through my own observation and vision on a piece of paper on the other side of the world. I think that's pretty special. And now she's going to exist in on lots of pieces of paper on lots of different countries. That's so exciting. It's really humbling, but that connection, you know, that's amazing. So I can see that this lightness here, I don't want there to be a definition on the edge of that. I just want to blend that out a little bit. Whereas these lights here are very defined, you know. They're soft around the edges, but they're very defined. These ones are not defined as a shape. They're soft. I'm just knocking back that one a little bit because the real highlight is up here. The really lightest light. So yeah, this is a process moving forward. So I'm just going backwards and forwards, and sometimes something will capture my eye and I have to go back and fix that, and then I can sort of move on again. So it may look like I'm sort of jumping from one part to the next, and I guess that's part of that process, you know, like I'm looking at my reference. Whatever line I've just laid down may make me look at a different area or see that something that I've done needs a different approach, more of or less of. So I think that I have a lot of the dark definitions down now, like where I want them. I'm going to go back with the 2B now and lay in some more sort of mid-tones. I'm going to leave her hair up here pretty well unfinished, I think. But I just want to make sure there's not quite as big a transition between the stark white that we've put down and the mid-tone. So I'm just going to go up to the stark whites a bit, flesh out this mid-tone a little bit more, which then means that I need to go back in and put some more darks in, which is good, because it helps the lights make sense, it helps them pop out. And I'm doing broad scribbly strokes. And I've really put the lead right out, so I'm expecting it to go crack and pop off anytime soon now. Like that. And then this would be the process that I would do just all the way to the end. So I keep going backwards and forwards. You know, if I really want to render out all of the details quite fastidiously, quite realistically, it's exactly this same process. So it's just keeping going, keep pushing, until it gets to a point where you know that it's finished, or where it feels finished, or where you don't feel like you need to do anything more to it, you know. But don't leave it at a point where you feel like it's finished but you're scared to keep going, you know. Like, just keep pushing. As I said, what's the worst can happen? But I think she's looking beautiful. I'm really happy with her. And this is the second time I've studied her now. I did a little piece for Sculptober, but a different angle. And I'm just still so enamoured of her. There's a life to this sculpture, for me anyway, that is, you know, deeply affecting me on a personal level. And that's what art's about, right? And it's different for each of us, absolutely. There's some universals that we can all appreciate. But ultimately, you know, it's all a personal experience. Both the viewing and the making, you know, it's personal. So this is a good point where I can remind myself as well not to try and compare your art with anybody else either. You're on your own journey. None of us can be in exactly the same part of the journey. We all see things differently, we all observe things differently. And that's what makes creation of art beautiful, I think. We can relate to it, we can find ourselves in other people's pieces of art. Oh. Alright, I think we're on the home stretch now. And I just know I'm going to be studying this face again. And that's such a significant way to learn too, to use the same reference over and over, and to watch your growth from doing that. Comparing as you go along your own journey, how you first approached it, and how you approach it this time, how you approach it the next time. Use different mediums. What I'm doing there is, I just didn't like how the graphite over the top of the white was making like a weird, like an odd tone, I guess. So I've just pulled that graphite off. I'm just going to redefine that highlight a little bit. It was too stark before, but I didn't knock it back the right way. See? Eraser makes everything better. Okay. So you need to be aware that using a blending stick does change the relationship of the graphite to the paper. It pushes it in a different way. It smooths things out, so you've got to be careful to use it, or the way you use it, I suppose, unless you end up having to use it everywhere. So I'm using a very light touch. I'm using sort of circular motion. That's just to push in some of the graphite in some of the spots. I don't want to go overboard with that. But it can give like a nice sort of dreamy quality to it as well, if that's what you're after. And then this part down the bottom here where her hair is, I just want to fade that out. So there's not any definition of pencil strokes. It just sort of fades off rather than trying to finish it out. I think that helps. To this side as well. And I've only done that leaf from the apple really lightly, but I kind of feel like we get an understanding of what that is. It's another nice little element to have there. I can see myself doing a full rendering of, you know, her holding the apples. And in case you didn't notice, I actually really like this sculpture. It might not be obvious. Okay, I think that we might be done here. Although I could keep going for a long time yet, but I feel like I've accomplished what I wanted to with this particular study. And I've had so much fun doing it. I have enjoyed the stillness around this sort of meditative study. Okay. So there we have it. A study of that beautiful statue of Eve. I hope you enjoyed that. I really did, and it's making me want to do another study of her, perhaps on different paper, on a larger scale. I really enjoyed that. I can't wait to see how she inspires you, what it is that you decide to do with her picture, with her visage. And I really appreciate you taking some time to hang out with me and put some pencil to paper and sip from that divine creative well together.